ENEA Tech and Biomedical Foundation is becoming now one of the most active biotech investors in Italy as for February 2025. It's a private foundation but publicly driven. They have been basically working into two kind of framework. One is essentially more of a tech transfer kind of framework, focusing specifically on green, circular economy, information technology, and deep tech. The second part is a fund that essentially works in biomedical research and industrial development. So basically they support new drug, vaccines, diagnostic product, and medical device.
It was launched a few years ago. It was supposed to be somehow some kind of parallel operator with respect to CDP Venture Capital. Fondazione ENEA Tech was in a sense down-powered, in a sense focused around the biomedical sector in particular.
Interesting week, an intense week, given the fact that one operator that we mentioned is really doing a lot for the Italian biotech ecosystem, and we're talking about ENEA, Fondazione ENEA. So very interesting. We mentioned it last week by a few rounds that the Fondazione was basically running. Last week essentially also is moving extremely fast. So let's maybe review a little bit what the Fondazione ENEA Tech and Biomedical is about. So it's a private it's a private foundation but publicly driven in a way. So they have been basically working into two kind of framework. One is essentially more of a tech transfer kind of framework. So trying to support universities and how exactly to move technologies from the university to actually product. Focusing specifically on green, circular economy, information technology, and deep tech. And then the second part is a fund that essentially works in biomedical research and industrial development. And this also is moving extremely fast. So basically they support new drug, vaccines, diagnostic product, and medical device. All of this is essentially also focused on what is sensitive for the Italian government. So there is a big, I would say, and then Nick, tell me if you have any insight on this, but my feel is that really the Italian government is somehow directing anything that is of interest of Italy as a nation. So interesting fund, one of the big player, one of the big institution, together with CDP, and that definitely is shaping what is happening in biotech in Italy. So, we have a few big VCs, but ENEA Tech is really taking a big pace compared to the past. So This is my overview in general. What's your feel on this?
No, I agree with you. So same feeling, absolutely. Let me just, frame some history around ENEA Tech. It was launched a few years ago. It was supposed to be somehow some kind of parallel operator with respect to CDP Venture Capital, investing mostly in the deep tech area. So biotech, information technology, climate tech. And it was promised quite a big amount of funding from the government. And then there was some reshuffling in the, I figured, around political decisions and political power, and the Fondazione ENEA Tech was in a sense down-powered, in a sense focused around the biomedical sector in particular, and as you said, around also some specifics related to technology transfer. And in this current shape, they started investing in particular in the life sciences space.
Fantastic. So let's start from the first deal. I would say let's talk about Newronika, company specializing in advanced deep brain simulation, raising 13.6 million. So pretty substantial round in Series B from Fondazione ENEA Tech, Indaco Venture Partners, Innogest, and Wille Finance and TNBT Capital. So let's talk about first what is happening. This is an interesting topic. So the deep brain simulation, again, not specialist into the field, but definitely seeing a lot of things happening into the tech industry. from Neuralink down, essentially, there is a lot of visibility on companies working on a lot of different angles to do like brain stimulation. So essentially, we've seen also like a few deals several months ago when it comes to this kind of approach. So that's very, very, it's a very actual, it's a very modern and contemporary sort of topic. So what is interesting is that they're working with adaptive deep brain stimulation, DBS, which they basically made it as a platform that helps adjusting therapy based on real-time data. So they're basically leveraging a few things. So not only something that captures brain waves, but also something that gives immediate feedback to adjust therapy, and that really raises a lot of issues when it comes to what's going to happen for the next generation of therapies when it comes to certain diseases like Parkinson's disease or other therapies like that. So very, very interesting.
Yeah. Super.
Yeah.
I was taking a look at the notes. So, I mean, they're focusing on around diseases that somehow affect movement in the specific approach, if I read it right. So like the Parkinson's disease. They received a grant from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. That, of course, makes sense. So, a very specific application of this approach.
Absolutely. So yeah, and Italy seems like a good cradle for this kind of technology. So a few deals happen, and it's very specific. So what I'm surprised is really to see a repetitive pattern in this kind of sort of neurostimulation space. So apologies for the broad sort of scope of gathering everything in the same bucket, but that's how what we do. We basically look into patterns, and that seems like one for Italy.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Excellent. So another interesting deal, of course, where ENEA Tech participated is Approxima Biotech startup raising 7.3 million. So again, fairly huge rounds here. So 13, 7, and then the next one is going to be 3 million. So pretty relatively big. So series like late A to B, I would say. So a very powerful player in that sense. So that's extremely interesting. Going back to Approxima, so Approxima is basically working on another very specific problem, which is essentially tricuspid regurgitation, TR, which is a condition of the tricuspid valve of the heart, and essentially they're trying to find new ways to remodel essentially the ventricle in a way that is more effective. So again, very niche, very specific application, very specific application for certain disease, and a relatively huge sum for these kind of developments. So typical for biotech, but definitely notable when it comes to early stage fundraising. Awesome. Let's mention also the last deal, which is VST SRL, again raising 3 million in early stage round. From ENEA Tech and Biomedical Foundation, I think as a lead investor, probably. And this is an interesting concept. So essentially, they're manufacturing a device which is tracking the 5 big sort of parameters that everyone should monitor when tracking health, which essentially is heart rate, respiratory rate, body temperature, blood pressure, and blood oxygenation. In a very specific and precise way, so that actually you can easily monitor these kind of parameters, which are the basis for a lot of like prevention in general. So very interesting, definitely something. Well, my feeling is that we're blurring some lines here because the device is pretty immediate, AI powered, very usable. And it kind of reminds me of everything that is happening in the sports tech and fitness industry with the trackers. So on one side, medical devices are becoming much more user-friendly. On the other side, like dumb sort of tracking device for fitness are becoming smarter and smarter and more precise. So I feel there is a convergence here of product. So maybe there is something there where maybe there is an interesting middle ground where precision health and personalized health will become like a very, very common thing, quicker than we might think actually.
You're thinking of the definitive health device from a science fiction movie, and it will be the iWatch. Anyhow, anyhow, there's another emerging pattern. This is a shallow pattern, but still a pattern. If you've noticed among these investments, diseases affecting the movement. That problem with the heart related to aging, aging-related disease, and VST again related to keeping track of monitoring some health parameters. And it sounds to me that these three investments are related to somewhat a silver tech approach, a silver tech vision. I mean, an aging population will have this type of needs and this type of problems. So there's an emerging thesis underneath these investments somehow that's emerging. That's interesting.
Very interesting, absolutely. Beautiful. All right, so to mention a few others of the biggest investment of last week, let's talk about really quick NOB 4.0 Imatra, raising 8 million in an early stage round from CDP Venture Capital and Fintech Partners. So essentially, Imatra is a digital startup working in the space between fintech and sports tech. So essentially, they're catering people that are cyclists, and they're basically working on finding a platform that support cyclists in doing their activities. So kind of giving some incentive through coins. So again, we see here an interesting element, which is sort of the resurgence of coin as a system for incentive. And these kind of plays that want to use these kind of benefits, I would say, to incentivize a workout or different kind of activities. So, kind of tapered down a little bit back in 2001 and 2. Now is like kind of maybe back in some flashes. We see some people reusing the concept of coin in some form or another. So the spirit of like using these kind of tools is still active, I feel.
Yeah, I always wonder at scale if this type of mechanism to push behavior works. I mean, but anyhow, given the round and given the opportunity, maybe in this case it will absolutely work. So
yeah, huge round by the way. For this kind of application.
I'm curious to see it.
Super curious.
Evolving.
Let's talk about the VEM. VEM is one of the big reports happening in Italy in the beginning of the year, together with the Ernst Young report on venture capital and the Osservatorio report, basically telling us a different kind of side of snapshot of the venture capital ecosystem. So for people that want to check out also some other data, I think that's an interesting report to dig into.
Yeah. It's one of the oldest reports on the venture capital market in Italy. And in this case, the number is more or less the same as the other reports, 1.2 billion of capital raised by Italian startups. It's interesting that in that report, VM also keeps track of Italian founders operating abroad, so raising capital abroad. And there's, I think, considerably high number of 700 million of capital raised by Italian founders operating abroad. So that makes their report providing a 1.9 billion euros figure for the overall Italian startups ecosystem. That's interesting. I mean, it's a big number.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And
so more than half.
Substantial. Yeah, I mean, every year there is always this debate of, who's leaving Italy, who's coming back. I've seen some articles saying, okay, the cervelli are back, the brains are back, and then everyone is happy. But then last year, another article was saying, no, a lot of young people are leaving, we have a problem, etc. So interesting to see how exactly the dynamic evolved. Exactly.
There's a flow there. I mean, you can only peek at the outgoing, at the incoming number, and there's a flow, and one year will be positive, one year will be negative. I mean, it's probably net negative, meaning that's a lot of outflow still. That's the perception, but the inflow is of good quality.
I agree.
If I look at the domestic market. So We see, but again, 700 million outside of Italy, 1.2 billion in Italy.
It's still massive. The proportion
massive, right?
Is interesting. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, talking about data, let's talk about, it's almost the end of February. Let's compare the first 2 months of 2025 with the first 2 months of 2024. So right now, the situation is a little bit on the lower side, but there is a clear explanation why. So I believe in 2025, so February 2025, we are at 180 something million against the 300 plus from last year. So yeah, Nick, what is your take on this?
350 to be precise, 187. Yeah, well, in February last year we had Banding Spoons raising 140 something million euros and MMI raising 100 and something million euros. So if you take away 240 million from the number, 2025 will stay ahead of last year. So the underlying trend, so of the average, if I may say so, Series A, seed and Series A rounds is growing steadily year over year with no spikes. And we have spikes when there is the massive Series B or Series C round. That's very rare. We have just a few every year, but those are the numbers that really, the rounds that really move the numbers. But if you look at the underlying growth, it's there. It's not huge, but it's there and consistent.
So the trend line is solid, I would say. I'm wondering whether we're gonna have. We have more or less spikes, kind of bringing up the whole trend line, because basically Banding Spoons, or even in the past year, ScalaPay or Satispay really kind of moved up the whole trend, of course. My feeling is that, I don't see there are more and more kind of big spikes. There is usually maybe 2 or 3, I would say, per year that are really changing a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of a wild guess on what has been happening.
Well, I have to say that if I take a look at the tracker, in 2024 we had only 2 rounds above 100 million, and they were both in February. And then one 60 million round in November, Satispay, and then a few 50 million from the Arbit, Genespire 46 million. So 2 real spikes and a few sizable rounds. 2022 it was the real outlier, with ScalaPay raising 440 million euros. So repeat after me, Jack. 440. We have never seen that again. 2025, there is no huge round. There is no round above 15 million, but a consistent number of rounds in a few millions, 10, 12, 15 million range. And that's positive. What I would like to see, and of course working on it, that's my day job, is to have new startups that are able to raise the 100 million plus euros. Otherwise, it's always the same names: Banding Spoon, Satispay. They've been those for a few years now. So
absolutely. All right, this brings us to the end of this episode. So Nick, thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next week for the next news.
Ciao, Jack. Take care. Ciao, everybody. Have a great week.